Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it is the voice of Chytown, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA Broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, we got a great show lined up for you today. All kinds of good stuff. As usual, we may have just a bit too much, but we'll trim it on the fly if we have to. Just a couple of highlights coming up. Now, I wanted to mention, too, make sure, if you haven't already, you're listening to our true crime series. The format is slightly different. Here on the MOA broadcast, I've got a full hour. So I tend to speak rather extemporaneously and kind of go off and on tangents and so forth. And we get into all kind of stuff because we have a little bit more time to work with. On the true crime series, I try and keep it to about 35 minutes. That way, if folks are listening to it on their lunch break or their drive home or while their kids are screaming and they want to tune out for a while or whatever, they have the opportunity to do that. So in the true crime series, which if you're subscribed to the MOA broadcast, it's running under the same brand and everything else, same podcast. But I try and put out a true crime podcast about once a week, usually drops on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, somewhere in there. And the MOA broadcast usually pops up on the feed on Sunday to Monday. That way you got two shows to listen to. On the true crime version, though, I try and keep it to about 35 minutes, and I have an intro where I kind of speak like I am now, just running my mouth and, getting the feel for you and everything else. But then I go to a manuscript form, so I'm kind of reading off a manuscript that I prepared. That way I don't miss any salient points, and I don't go into a 3-hour ramble, which could be easy. Because when you start doing the research, the first series we're doing is going to be several mob hitmen and a mafia-focused true crime series. I've always been fascinated by mafia and murders and so forth. They're horrible. I don't want to emulate them or look up to them, but the stuff these people are in, they're wild. I mean, you're talking about just the wild, wild west here. So I've always found it fascinating when you see humans and let them on the loose. If you've ever been involved in just pure bedlam, a riot or something of that, a disturbance of some sort, it's unreal what humans will do when left to their own devices and think there's no consequence. I've seen some absolutely insane things take place when people think there won't be any consequences or they just don't care. So anyway, that being said, you can catch that on the same channel here if you're subscribed on Spotify or Apple or on the website, gearconvoy.com, whatever. That being said, if you got any tips, if you got any feedback or a subject or a crime or a criminal that you would like to get, featured or focused on, send us an email, info@gearconvoy.com. That's info@gearconvoy.com, and we'll try and make that happen. Okay, now, to our show today, we got all kinds of stuff. This is going to be a throwback or a callback to last week's episode. Remember that Wisconsin judge that tried to allegedly help that illegal immigrant escape from ICE inside of a courtroom? Well, we're back to her. She had some problems. The subway rapist that we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, they got him. Interesting story there. We're going to get to that momentarily. Fly fishing with hollow handle survival knives. I try and keep an outdoor component here, at least for a good segment of the show each week. So we got a couple of things we're going to get to on the outdoors, because this is, after all, that's one of my first loves, is being out hiking, camping, especially backpacking, and even more so catching fish and fishing while in the hills and mountains of Oregon, and then cooking while backpacking is one of my absolute favorites. So we try and keep a focus and circle back to those as much as possible. And finally, we have supermarket stabbings. Guess where? That's right, Florida. Nowhere else could it be. So, speaking of supermarket, you know what? I was going to do this last week, and I got too caught up in all of the material that I had. But speaking of the supermarket, I can guarantee you, right before you get upset, let me finish what I'm about to say. Let me get the whole thing out there, and then we're going to break it down piece by piece, very briefly, just a couple of minutes here. But I'm going to throw out a hypothetical scenario and I want you to answer honestly. You have the benefit of answering honestly, either to the person that you're sitting next to and listening to this with, to yourself, or by sending us an email at info@gearconvoy.com. Let me know how you would answer this question. I have to put it out there in front of everybody and sign my name to it. So, that being said, if you were in the supermarket, let's say you're in the meat department specifically, you're not in a butcher shop, you're in the meat department of the general supermarket, you're doing your grocery shopping, and you're there to get a steak. Now, who would you rather be stuck behind? A woman who doesn't know what she's looking for and what she's doing, selecting a steak, a cut of steak to cook for dinner, or a man who equally has no idea what he is looking for and what cut of meat he's after. There's no sexism. There's no misogyny. Both are on an equal playing field here. Neither one of them know what they're doing. So my question to you is, who would you rather be stuck behind? You're sitting there, you know exactly what you want, and you're just waiting for this person to pick something and get out of the way. Who would you rather be? I don't have to wonder. This has happened to me 2 or 3 times in the last month or two. It's almost it's unimaginable. The odds are incalculable that this has happened to me over and over again. The answer is you want to be stuck behind a man who doesn't know what he's doing. And here is the answer why. It has nothing to do with men or women, who's inferior, who's superior. Neither one of them, as we've established, neither one knows what they really want. But here's the problem, especially in America. We have created and produced, and I say we, I'm going to actually exempt myself from the problem because, if anything, I have fought against this problem for decades now. But we'll use the collective we just for the sake of context and grammar. We have created this group of women, these strong, independent women who have no idea what they're doing, but they think men are always the enemy and a problem. Folks, it's so bad that when I go to I was raised in the rural Midwest. I was raised to always hold the door for especially women, men too, but particularly women, and to be particularly courteous and kind to women. Now, especially the younger generation of women, they almost treat you like you're a sex predator if you hold the door for them and nod your head, or I wear a cowboy hat when I'm in public, usually when I'm out and about, and you tip your hat to them, just trying to be courteous. They treat you like Chris Hansen is ready to kick your door in and take you into custody many times, not always. Whereas the opposite happens with women of I won't give a number here, but let's just say a slightly older demographic of women they're thrilled to get a little bit of courtesy and attention, to have you offer to pick up their bags or carry something for them or whatever else. I was in a UPS store a couple of weeks ago, and this lady had a heavy package that I offered to pick up and carry for her the rest of the way. She was, let's just say she wasn't a younger generation female, and we'll leave it at that. She was so thrilled that I picked up and carried her heavy package and then put it on the scale for her at the UPS place. Whereas a younger woman, I probably wouldn't have even tried because I don't feel like getting tased. So anyway, back to the point at hand, the question. Would you rather be behind a man or a woman? The answer is simple, and here is why. A man who, especially unless he's one of these super young soy boys who have no idea what in the world's going on, they have no raising, probably no father in their life, which isn't entirely their fault, or their fault at all, I should say. A man that's not one of those younger soy boys, if he doesn't know what's going on, if he doesn't know what he's looking for in a steak, in a cut of meat, and you're standing there behind your cart waiting patiently, but he can see you are obviously watching to see when is this guy going to grab something and get out of the way. Usually what a man's going to do is, even if they have no idea, they're going to grab something because they don't want to appear to not know what they're doing. It's been taught in society that men should know, and they should know what kind of steak they want or what kind of piece of meat, whatever, or learn, get out there and learn. We've got the internet. There's nothing that's not unlearnable almost now. A man is typically going to just grab something after a few seconds and just get out of the way, and he'll either live with it or he'll come back later when you're not there anymore and swap it for what he really wants when he has more time. These strong, independent women that we have created in America particularly are going to stare at you, and I've had this happen to me twice now. A third time, they were just completely oblivious and rude. But twice now, they stare at me like I'm some sort of psychopath, just waiting. I know exactly what I want. Stare at me like I'm a psychopath and just take that much time extra to look around, even though they have no idea what they're looking for. So that's my answer. Why don't you send us an email? Let us know what you think. But I already know what the truth is. This came from personal experience. And if you're wrong, if you think I'm incorrect, if you're a strong, independent women's, tell me right now in 3 seconds or less, what's your favorite cut of meat and how do you prepare it? 1, 2, 3. Boom. If you don't have an answer by then you need to go to the back of the class and reassess your work on this assignment. Because I can tell you right now exactly what I would do. New York strip, medium rare, bing, bang, boom, finished in butter. Done. All right, now we move on. We go to the Wisconsin Supreme Court suspends Judge Hannah Dugan after her arrest. Now, folks, if you remember from last week's episode, Judge Hannah Dugan, we're going to use the appropriate alleged and all that and so forth, allegedly in the affidavit or the complaint filed by ICE and whatever other federal jurisdictions and authorities were involved. There was a trial going on in her courtroom at like 8 a.m. or whatever with an illegal immigrant, and ICE was waiting outside to nab this guy. He had several run-ins with the law in the past. When she found this out, allegedly, she helped, well, I'll just read from the article. She helped the guy escape, though, let her, the illegal dude and his lawyer escape out a side door and sent him down the side of the building to get away from ICE, allegedly. This is insane. So ICE pursued him with a foot chase. Fortunately, they caught him. He's taken care of it. Last I read, he was in Juneau or something like that. They got him. Chances are he's going on a long trip south, shall we say. But the Milwaukee County judge who was arrested, the judge wound up being arrested over this for obstruction. Charges she obstructed federal authorities from detaining an undocumented immigrant in our courtroom, has been suspended by the Wisconsin Supreme Court. In an order issued Tuesday, the state high court announced that Dugan was being temporarily relieved of her duties as circuit court judge in order to, quote, uphold the public confidence in the court of the state, quote, end quote, as her criminal proceedings play out. Do you realize how insane that is, if that's actually what happened? Now, that's what the surveillance and the witness statements and the affidavit all say. If this judge actually helped an illegal or an undocumented migrant, whatever we're going to call him, I don't really care. It boils down to the same thing. If you're not here legally in this particular situation, she tried to give him instructions on how to escape. If that's what happened, do you realize how insane that is? And we're not going to get political. I don't do that here. I just give you the news. But occasionally I will inject some commentary, as I'm doing right now. I'm just asking a question. Do you realize how crazy that is? The article reads, Dugan was arrested by FBI agents on the morning of April 25th and released on her own recognizance after a hearing later that day. Officials have cited Dugan as an example of what they claim is a pattern of judges trying to thwart executive power. Here's a statement by our current Attorney General, Pam Bondi. She said, "What has happened to our judiciary is beyond me." She had referred to some judges as deranged. I think some of these judges think they are beyond and above the law. I do not. It's hard to imagine. Dugan's legal team did not respond to NBC News' request for comment about her suspension. Her lawyers told the AP they were disappointed that the court acted in unilateral fashion, and they maintained, I don't know what that means. There is strong evidence from what I've seen that she probably did these things. If so, she's got some serious problems. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. But she's probably got some serious problems if she did these things. And this is what I'm seeing. Again, we're not going to get political or pick a political side or a party to support, but I think we can all agree that we must have law and order. And if you use X, or as it used to be called Twitter, much, and look at some of these alternative media sources where people don't have to go through what they call the legacy media now, things like, watching the news on the TV, CNN, CBS, MSNBC, blah, 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 NBC, and these so forth. There are all kinds of people they're posting about themselves doing things to thwart the government and the law and to buck the system. And they're proud of this just because they don't happen to like who the president is. That's a serious problem. The president, on those matters right there, the president should be immaterial. When you want to aid and abet someone to break the law, and that becomes a societally acceptable or socially acceptable thing to do, you got some serious problems ahead of you. So I'm going to leave it at that. Again, we're not going to dip into politics, but it is scary when you see the amount of people that are willing and ready to break the law and then go brag about it just because they don't like a certain person or an official in power. We're not talking about things like a civil protest or something that is covered and protected by the Constitution. We're talking about out and out breaking the law, firebombing car dealerships because they don't like a person. And feeling like they're justified. It's scary. Okay, so anyway, we're going to leave that. We move on to let me get a sip here to drink. Our next story. Now, if you recall, I think about 2 episodes ago, there was a story of an absolutely detestable freak. This is somewhat adult subject matter. This is all coming from a newspaper, so we're not going to get overly explicit, but if you have kids listening, I try and keep this a family-friendly show. This is kind of explicit. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago in New York, there was that sick freak that sexually molested a dead body on the subway. Now, we didn't identify it in that statement right there, but the person who did that has got to be a sick freak. That's against the law and against several other things. We'll leave it at that. Let's go to the article from the New York Post. The headline first: sicko charged with raping corpse on NYC subway is illegal immigrant who crossed the border at least 5 times, according to ICE. The depraved deviant, you gotta love the New York Post. If you've ever spent much time in New York, there were a couple of newspapers you might read if you're into newspapers. I'm holding, if you don't have the video version of this podcast, I'm holding all this stuff on paper. I like hard copy. There is a different experience when you're holding paper in your hand and reading from it as opposed to online. Anyway, we'll get, whatever. That's maybe a generational thing. But if you read newspapers, the New York Post was the one you would grab first while you're sitting there having your everything bagel with cream cheese and our lox or something like that on there, and you're having your local coffee from a great, bagel store or shop. You sit there and read. That will get you going in the morning, get you through your subway ride or your first couple of minutes of work while you're trying to wake up, because the New York Post would just put it all out there, man. They would go crazy. Like these headlines: sicko charged with raping corpse on New York City subway. So anyway, we go back to our story. The depraved deviant who allegedly raped a corpse on a Manhattan subway train for 30 minutes is an illegal immigrant who crossed into the U.S. from Mexico at least 5 times before finally getting locked up over the sick act. According to statements the Post has exclusively learned, Felix Rojas, 44, unlawfully crossed the U.S.-Mexico border on several occasions in the late 90s before being caught by Border Patrol and voluntarily turning back. According to ICE, he apparently crossed the border at least once more, undetected by authorities until New York cops arrested him on Sunday in connection to the shocking defilement of 37-year-old family man Jorge Gonzalez, who suddenly died on an R train nearly 3 weeks before. Now, if you don't recall, this guy was on the train. Jorge Gonzalez is sitting there on the R train. I forget where they're, Whitehall or something. I think they were in southern Lower Manhattan, on the Whitehall train down there. And he gets on the train. Some lady walks up. They got the video from the train. Somebody walks up, gives him something to smoke. And then like 30 minutes later, whatever, he passes out or dies, apparently. And I guess she went through his pockets and she left. At some point then, this guy, allegedly Felix Rojas, we don't know, maybe it was somebody else, whatever, they'll settle that in court, defiled his corpse sexually for 30 minutes on a subway train. Now, I'm not going to lie, folks. I rode the train thousands of times. I saw a lot of sick, depraved, disgusting, and sometimes violent, both physically and sexually, things on the train. I never saw a guy rape a dead corpse and molest his body. That's shocking no matter how you slice it. Anyway, they no longer believe though. So initially they were concerned that the cigarette or whatever it was that this woman gave to the guy before he died to smoke may have had some effect on him. They now believe that he died of natural causes. So apparently there was no effect. I don't know. There's no relation between the whatever he smoked and when he died. Surveillance footage showed Rojas, that's the offender, allegedly first rifled through Gonzalez's pockets to allegedly rob him, then return to sexually assault the man's corpse, according to prosecutors. Gonzalez's death is believed to be from natural causes. So I guess the cigarette didn't have anything in it or whatever it was. Who knows? It's whatever. What a disgusting, freak show we got going on there, but only in New York, baby. Wow. Rojas, who faces multiple charges of rape and grand larceny, was ordered held without bail. There's some more stuff on it. It doesn't really matter, though. This is his immigration status and so forth. He is currently being held with the city's Department of Corrections at Rikers Island after he was ordered remanded pending trial in the rape case. So, wow, man. I'm telling you can't make this stuff up. Okay, now we've discussed a number of times. We've talked about food, and I like food. You may or may not be able to tell. I like food. I like cooking, especially in the outdoors. Food just tastes better when you cook outdoors. But also, like a growing number of people, like a lot of people in the U.S. today, I'm concerned about all of the stuff that is being put into our food. It is crazy. All the additives, the chemicals and other things, forget vaccines and masks and all that. That's its own issue. But we have so much stuff going into our food today. It's scary. This article, I'll read you the title and we'll kind of get into it first. We talked about last week and the week before the cultured meat. They're trying to grow chicken and beef and other types of meat in a bioreactor and feed it to us. Now, why? Guys, chicken and beef and pork have been around for thousands of years as far as the human race is concerned, at least, right? It's been working out just fine. We don't need to grow it in a lab with all of that. This stuff, it's scary. So let's get the article. Feed manufacturers add synthetic additives such as xanthophyll to chicken feed. Why? To change the yolk color. Excuse me. Now, I read a couple of articles on this, and at first it sounded really scary. I try not to be an alarmist and just spread panic and be like a chicken little, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, don't eat this food, it's going to poison you and you're going to die. I read a couple of articles. The first one or two were basically talking about how poisonous these chemicals are and how bad it is. So the long and short of it is feed companies will add chemicals to the feed that goes to chickens so that it will make the yolk appear a more yellow, a more orange, or whatever color. Sometimes yolks come out red, sometimes they come out a little more orange, sometimes a little more yellow. They want to make them look like they're free-range chickens or whatever they're calling them today, pasture-raised, I don't know, whatever, cage-free, whatever, blah, 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 cruelty-free, this, that, and the other. And I'm all for that. Free-roaming chickens or free-ranging chickens are great. I get eggs locally a lot of times from people that have chickens, and they taste great. That being said, what they're doing is basically they're trying to change the feed of the chickens to artificially affect the color of the yolk so that regular chicken farm chickens look like they're free range or pasture raised or whatever the hot buzzword of the day is. Now, it doesn't seem to be as bad. I'll have to do more research. I didn't want to jump all over this, but I'll just share with you some of the information. What it does, some of these chemicals they can add turn the color of the yolk orange and make the eggs look like they would have been on a grass-fed farm. What they are is this. Xanthophylls, that's the chemical they use, are a type of carotenoid, a class of yellow and orange plant pigments. They're oxygenated derivatives of carotenes, meaning they contain oxygen atoms in their chemical structure. Now, that sounds kind of crazy at first, but from what I've read, and again, I'm not an expert on this, from what I've read and the research I did, that isn't as bad as it sounds at first. Sources of xanthophyll carotenoids can be natural, such as corn and red peppers, or synthetic, such as words that are way too long to even try and canthaxanthin and others, blah, blah, blah. The question is, are they really harmful? Carotenoids are widely used in the food, pharmaceutical, and cosmetics industries, as well as the feed industry. And this has been going on for a long time. Sometimes an article will come up and it tries to make something seem as though it's just now happening, so that you kind of freak out and, oh my gosh, what are they putting in our food now? whereas it's been happening. This has been going on for years. Okay. Um, it's used, these xanthophylls are widely used as an additive in layer poultry farming, with xanthophylls, the group, being the most widely used since they are absorbed and accumulated in the body, thus modifying the color of the egg yolk. Now, that being said, the general consensus is that synthetic carotenoids are generally safe when consumed at typical dietary levels or recommended supplement dosages. However, high doses, especially when taken long term, may pose risks. So, again, we're going to keep an eye on this. We'll go back and do some more research, but it's not anything I would freak out over just yet. This has been going on a long time, it sounds like. Some of these articles were from back in 2009. So this isn't something brand new. But that being said, who wants to have eggs that have been altered in any way? Why not, again, go back to the natural thing? It's been working fine for a very, very long time. Okay, so anyway, keep that in mind when you're buying organic, free range, or pasture raised, whatever buzzword they're using to describe those eggs. Sometimes they may have been modified to make the yolk look a certain color and fool you. There you go. That's what I found. All right, we got some listener email. Then we have another pepper spray story and some situational awareness stuff. Good stuff here. All right, this is Peter from the Pacific Northwest. Let me get a sip here really quickly in my voice. Takes a beating on these longer podcasts and shows. This is Peter, who was also from the Pacific Northwest. Hello. I just wanted to say I've been enjoying the podcast very much. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for doing an outdoors themed podcast, even though you do add in a good bit of news and current events. Well, I try, Peter. There's a lot, I got to appeal to everybody, but your point is noted. But, he says, the show doesn't get caught up in politics. We try and do that. A show about survival, outdoor living, hanging out in the woods and all that stuff will get very boring, except to a very small handful of people. So we try and cover some current events and news. But again, we try and steer clear of giving in a political opinion. I'm tired of having that shoved down my throat. Anyway, if you'd like to have more stuff about the outdoors, let us know. We'll certainly be happy to do it. But don't know that everyone wants to hear about living in the woods. Okay, back to Peter. My question, though, is about fishing. You state that you are in Oregon. I am, Peter, don't worry. I'm in the Pacific Northwest also. You've mentioned using the pack light while going fishing, and I have since purchased a pack light, but I have yet to take it fishing. Good selection. The pack light is one of my hollow-handled survival knives on gearconvoy.com. The cord wrap on the handle kind of has me curious if it is going to absorb smell from fish or not. But that doesn't really worry me. Just curious, do you ever go fishing on any of the backpacking trips that you mentioned? And if so, what is your favorite fish to catch, and or what do you use to go fishing? Thanks again. I love the knife and looking forward to hopefully getting on the air. Well, Peter, you are on the air. You will be the recipient of our mini survival kit that will go out in the next couple of business days. Give me a day or three. Beginning of the week, we'll ship that out. You know what? We're going to go ahead and take the break. When we get back, we're going to answer Peter's questions about what we take fishing, what kind of fish we prefer, do we use the pack light, etc., even though you're not supposed to use more than one, etc. in a row. And we'll get into the pepper spray and situational awareness when we return. Be right back, folks. More Make It Out Alive with Sam Wilson after this.
Want to get your business noticed? Sponsor a show on KKFO Gold Country Radio on 103.3 FM and create awareness through on-air announcements, our online stream at goldcountryradio.org, and our podcasts that live on forever. Your message reaches a broad local audience while also targeting listeners who choose to tune in to the shows they love. Plus, we promote your sponsorship across our website and social media. For more information, email goldcountryradio@gmail.com. Call 541-238-6989 or visit goldcountryradio.org. Gold Country Radio, your message heard locally and beyond.
You're listening to the MOA Broadcast with Sam Wilson. Will you make it out alive? And we're back, folks. It is time for the second half of the MOA Broadcast featuring your host, Sam Wilson. Okay, before the break, you know what? During the break, I used to be a big fan I love chips. Like, I especially like the Ruffles, what was it? There was sour cream and cheddar cheese. And then what was the one that I really liked? It's been probably a year or two since I've really bought much. It was barbecue, sour cream, and cheese. I don't know, whatever it was. It was a good combination. The flavor's really good. I like the Ruffles. They had a really good crisp to them. Probably about 2, 3 years ago, I kind of laid off potato chips just because I just didn't really feel that good after eating them. So now I'll let myself maybe once a month, maybe twice a month. I'll buy a big bag of potato chips if it's something that I really like. Doritos brought back their old style tortilla chips from like the 80s and 90s with the old style packaging and everything. They do taste a little, they're not quite as good in my opinion. Maybe that's some nostalgia. Maybe it's just getting old, whatever. But they were pretty tasty. I'll have one of those once in a while. The problem with all these chips was they have so much salt. Like afterwards, there's so much salt. Anyway, over the break though, I picked up a bag of chips at the store the other day that I wanted to try because it was that time, all right, this is your bag of the month or whatever it is. It was cheese pizza flavored Cheetos. I don't know. One of the things I hate is when potato chips or whatever, any kind of chip, I hate it when they go light on the flavor. Like it's like if you just put a little bit more I know it means more salt and everything else, but I hate eating a chip that tastes like it's only half flavored. That's what I had some Pringles a while back. These Pringles, in my opinion, tasted like cardboard. There was hardly any flavor. The corn chip or whatever it's based on now, I don't know. It did not taste like a real chip at all. Anyway, the cheese pizza flavored Cheetos, they were all right. I probably wouldn't get them again. It just wasn't my flavor. It tasted like they kind of formulated it in a lab. It wasn't bad. It didn't taste super synthetic. It just didn't taste like it was really gonna. I love the Flamin' Hot Cheetos are fantastic. The Flamin' Hot Funyuns are good in my opinion. But those barbecue, I think they're Flamin' Hot barbecue sour cream and onion or whatever. I don't know. Ruffles. Those are probably my favorite. But those are really good. The cheese pizza flavored Cheetos, whatever. Anyway, let's get back to it. Now, we were talking before the break. Peter from the Pacific Northwest had emailed us. He was talking about whether or not how we used our pack light while fishing and what we did for fishing in the backpacking trips and so forth. So that being said, let's get to where were we here. Okay, fly fishing. So whenever I go backpacking, I have a breakdown fly rod. Now, we're going to try and make this a decent segment here because I know a lot of the people that watch this are outdoorsmen. A number of them have purchased my gear and my knives from gearconvoy.com, and for that, I'm very appreciative. Thank you for the support. So we'll try not to get too caught up in news and current events and other stuff. When I go backpacking, though, I have a breakdown fly rod that fits into like a hard plastic tube that I strap to the side of my backpack. Usually I go for like a 3 to 4 day trip. That is what I usually take with me. And in fact, I use that rod and one other fly rod for doing most of my fishing. Here in Oregon, the Pacific Northwest, we get lots of trout. And frankly, I have never had nearly as much success with bait casting reels as I have had with fly fishing. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of dudes that do great with the bait casting, a traditional, fly or fishing rod and reel as opposed to a fly rod. But I've always had the best success personally. And I've tried both extensively. I've lived here for years. I've had by far better success with the fly rod. And my number one lure is a dry fly. It's an elk hair caddis. I've got a whole bunch of others that I bring along with me in a small tin or a box. But I'll be honest, I hardly ever use them. I usually buy for every fly of a regular fly that I get, I'll get 2 to 3 or even 4 of those elk hair caddis flies. They just do fantastic for me here in the Pacific Northwest. What I usually catch is everybody talks about rainbow trout and how good they are. Rainbow trout taste great. Trout are delicious, period. I'm a big believer in catching what I eat. I love the taste of good pan-fried trout. But I catch a lot of brown trout where I'm at here in Oregon, and the various places, for whatever reason, the several different places that I go, whether I'm just going there to fish or I'm going there to go hiking and then fishing or backpacking and fishing, I tend to encounter a lot of brown trout. Brown trout are delicious. I like the texture and the flavor of brown trout very, very much. You will never see me turn my nose up at brown trout. I've seen Many fishermen do that. They're like, oh, I'd rather have a rainbow or this, that. I love brown trout. The other thing is, whenever I'm backpacking, I will typically have a small foldable skillet. The handle will fold in and has a lid, and I'll bring a little container of butter because there are, in certain areas here in Oregon, trout are very plentiful. They're very easy to catch, especially with a fly rod. And I'm telling you right now, very, very few things, as much as I love steak and red meat and so forth, very, very few things taste as good as a freshly caught brown trout or any kind of trout, pan fried in butter in the mountains of Oregon next to a campfire. It is absolutely amazing. And I know some people are going to say, oh, what about butter 3-4 days? You guys do what you believe is best for you and what you believe is safe. For well over 2 decades now, I have been taking butter with me on multi-day backpacking trips and cooking with it and never had any problems. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, pan-fried trout in butter is just absolutely amazing. Especially if you have like either some, what I really like with them is some hash browns, grilled up or fried up really on the side next to it, and then crack an egg or two in there. Eggs on hash browns with some fried trout is absolutely amazing. So that is my answer to that question. I hope that answered your question, Peter. As for the cord, so one of the things he mentioned in his question, if you're not familiar with hollow handle survival knives, these were a huge hit in the 80s due to the Rambo craze and so forth. But they are a valid concept when they're built properly, and I believe mine are made very, very well. There's a lot of evidence to back that up. That being said, typically what happens is because there's a round handle to give it, and it's a metal handle, you will wrap it with cord so that you have not only some emergency cordage, but it also kind of insulates your hand from the metal and gives you a more grippy handle and so forth. I'll be honest, on the pack light, which is, you can find those again at gearconvoy.com, very ultra lightweight, hollow handle survival knife, very thin, laser sharp. These things are built to cut. Smaller blade, like a 3-inch blade. That's what I take fishing with me. I just cut the cord off and use it bare handled. That way, whenever it's time to clean it up, all I got to do is take it to the sink, or if I'm fishing or camping, hiking, whatever, take it down the stream, rinse it off, and the metal won't absorb the odor from the fish. Now, if you still have the cord wrap on yours, no problem. All you have to do is when you get back home, if you're out on a trip, when you get back home, thoroughly scrub that cord out or wash it out with some Dawn dishwashing liquid or whatever. I like Dawn. I've used it for a lot of things over the years, both in the knife shop and the chemistry lab, so forth. It works really good. But a good dishwashing soap is all you need. Scrub that cord out really good and then rinse it out with some hot water. Let it sit overnight. You're going to be fine the next day. I wouldn't worry about it. If you ever want it rewrapped, you can do it yourself, or you can send it back to us here at Gear Convoy and Techline Knives, and we'll take care of it for you. So that's my answer to that email. Peter, you will be getting our survival kit this week. Looking forward to that. Hope you enjoy it and it serves you very well. Okay, let's see if I missed anything else. I think that's it. All right, remember, folks, if you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, send us an email at info@gearconvoy.com. We send out a free mini survival kit to the best email or feedback or question or suggestion we get every week. This week it was Peter. Next week it could be you. All right, situational. Oh, this is a good one. Okay, situational awareness. We've brought this up in a number of our episodes. In fact, you could easily say it's a recurring theme here at the MOA Broadcast. What is situational awareness? Briefly, if you follow the show, you're aware. If you're a guy that is, in the tactical community or the gun and knife community, you're probably aware. Situational awareness just means you're paying attention to your surroundings and what's going on around you at all times. And frankly, this is something that often gets applied to males, but males, females, both, especially, in my opinion, especially females. Like when you're on the train, on the bus, if you're in town driving, if you've got kids, you should be situationally aware. You're always looking to see, okay, is this going to be a problem? Is this going to be a threat? What would I do if this happened? Maybe not just a threat. If someone crosses the center line and goes into your lane of traffic, or if your kid, leans too far out the window, or whatever it is, you should be, as a person, as an adult and a parent, anticipating that, and not only if it happened, but what would you do? And what did I have written down here? I had a couple. Okay, so here's a couple of good cases. I mentioned this briefly last week as well about whenever I encountered mountain lion sign while I was out making camp to have lunch on a hike. In short, briefly, I was on a hike at a beautiful spot. There was a beautiful creek or river. I forget what it was. Spring Creek, I think it was. And as I was getting down, getting ready to set up my stove and start making lunch, I thought, let me take a look around. Immediately, I started noticing mountain lion scat, that's their feces. You can tell when they've defecated there. It's very distinct looking. You can easily spot it. And then several dead deer carcasses that had been eaten. And I'm like, okay, clearly this is by a water source. It's also by a food source. There are mountain lions and probably other mammalian predators that come here. Not a good idea to go ahead and sit here and cook up some food and maybe serve myself up as the next hot lunch. So that was being situationally aware in that context. Another time I was backpacking. I can't remember if I was alone. I think I may have been with somebody. I don't recall. We were on this trail, and I think it was fall time, so everything was kind of brown and dying. It was higher elevation. We were well over 4,000, probably close to 5,000 feet in elevation here in Oregon. And that may not be nearly as high as Mount Hood. Mount Hood's about 11,200 feet, give or take. But unless you're on Mount Hood, that's getting up there in elevation around 5,000 feet. And you would think that you wouldn't encounter as many mammals and a mammalian presence, but I absolutely did. In fact, in addition to a bear, mountain lion, you don't see many snakes here in Oregon. When I was in Missouri, we had a pretty steady supply of water moccasins, which are some aggressive, man. Everybody thinks of rattlesnakes when they think of American venomous snakes. Don't say poisonous, say venomous. Anyways, that's another story. But when you think of American venomous snakes, everybody thinks of rattlesnakes. Water moccasins, or cottonmouths, sometimes they're called, especially where I was at in Missouri, they were mean. They had, just like those kangaroos, they have an attitude problem and they go looking for trouble. I've encountered a number of those, killed, unfortunately had to, do a number of times, kill them because they're just aggressive. They would literally come after you when they're on the water. Like when I was float tubing once, had them chase me down on land more than once. They would come directly at you. Most wild animals, the first thing they'll do when they encounter a human or to detect or sense a human, usually they'll freeze. They would much rather freeze and hide if they can, avoid the whole encounter if possible. In fact, I encountered, the story I was going to tell a moment ago was at about almost 5,000 feet in the fall there, encountered a bear. And I probably wouldn't have seen it if it was a brown bear because the foliage was all dying, everything was brown, but it was a black bear at about 125 meters away on a straight line on a trail. And because the bear was so black and the foliage was so brown and dead, it stood out. I mean, immediately. When I turned around a corner, I saw it, and we both just froze. I mean, just completely stopped moving. We looked at each other. I looked around briefly to see, okay, what weapons and escape options do I have? When I looked back, the bear was gone without a sound. Most of the time, most animals are not that aggressive. They don't want anything to do with you. Water moccasins, however, in my experiences, will gladly make a beeline for you to come after you and attack you. They seem to enjoy it. They're very aggressive snakes sometimes, or at least most of the time I've encountered them. Copperheads, on the other hand, which are also venomous snakes, we had in abundance in Missouri. Copperheads, I never really had many aggressive encounters with them. Most of the time, they would just try and slither away or hide, which I let them go. Copperheads aren't that bad, but they're not real aggressive and real large snakes. Water moccasins or cottonmouths can get fairly large, and I mean, they can deliver a really, really nasty bite. So anyway, that being said, those are just a few. So being situationally aware, like that bear, if I had just been walking along, I was on a hike once. This is no joke. I was on a hike once, backpacking trip. It was a 3-day trip with this guy, and we were walking along, me and several other dudes were on this hike, and I looked over, and we'll call him Jerry. I looked over, and Jerry, he has headphones on. And I'm like, what in the world? I go, Jerry, what are you listening to? And I got his attention. He took his headphones off. I swear to goodness, this is the truth. He told me, I'm listening to nature sounds. And I'm like, wait. I go, you're listening to nature. You're in nature. Why are you listening to a tape on a Walkman? This shows you how old I am. It was on a Walkman, okay, with a tape. Why? Why are you listening to nature sounds on a tape when you are literally in nature? Do you think he could have possibly been situationally aware? Of course not. He's worried about it. He was holding the Walkman in his hand and listening to these nature sounds. So if I had been paying attention, who knows how close I would have got to that bear. Chances are, black bears aren't usually that aggressive. We had quite a few of them in Missouri. They usually aren't that aggressive. They would rather just get away. But he probably would have gone the other direction. But who knows? You never know. Another time, I was hiking again at over 5,000 feet here in Oregon and encountered an elk. Almost got trampled by this elk. I was walking along. I was by myself on that particular trip. I tend to be quiet. I wasn't trying to sneak around or be quiet, but I just tend to be a quiet person whenever I'm walking along. And I don't like to I was taught as a kid, you don't make noise and disturb things in the woods. That's how you do it. Anyway, I'm walking along and this elk, which was, if you've never been next to a large adult elk, holy smokes, you don't realize how large and heavy these animals are until you're close to one of them. And so I was walking along. I did not see him at all. I was looking around, just enjoying, it was that was a spring trip and the mosquitoes weren't too bad, but the foliage was just beautiful here in Oregon. And I didn't even see the thing at all until I was within probably about 10, 15 meters and scared the daylights out of this thing because he just stomped and snorted and took off at a dead run, blew right past me, crossed over the trail, knocking rocks out of the way. I could feel the ground rumble under this thing as it flew by me. Scared me to death. I had no idea what was happening until this thing literally flew right by me. I don't think I could have reached out and touched him, but he was close. I initially was about 15, 20 meters away because I saw the dust move up when he kicked his feet. And then for whatever reason came back my direction and went off across the trail right past me. So, you got to be paying attention. Fortunately, that wasn't a bear or something else. But again, mountain lions, a buddy of mine, they wound up killing a mountain lion. They didn't even realize they weren't hunting. They had a tag, but they weren't actually out hunting until they realized one just literally dropped down out of a tree nearby and took some prey. So, wild animals, they don't play games. Everything is life or death to them. So anyway, that's about being situationally aware. The pepper spray story. If you listen to this podcast or this broadcast, let me get a sip here. You know that I am a big fan of pepper spray. I don't really like lethal means of force. Anytime you take something's life, whether it's an animal, human, whatever, there's no going back. You've made a final decision. And legally, potentially economically, and otherwise, you now have a decision that you live with the rest of your life. Maybe it was the right one, maybe it wasn't. Doesn't matter. You still got to live with it. Even if it's the right one, using force can sometimes leave some memories you have to deal with. So, I've been attacked by numerous while I walk my dog, Bacon, around town. He's an absolutely fantastic pointer. He's a good boy. And me and Bacon go for walks. Bacon is not interested in fighting. He's a lover, not a fighter. He does not like other animals. He doesn't care. He just wants to smell and go out and enjoy the sunlight. He loves laying on the grass and soaking up the sun. Okay. We've been attacked so many times by stray dogs and packs of dogs while hiking and walking around town. I've gone through multiple cans of pepper spray in the last 12, 18 months, easily. So the other day, we're walking through town, and probably about 20 meters or so ahead, I see this car parked next to the road or next to the sidewalk, and the rear window is down, and I see two dogs with their heads sticking out of the car. And mentally, even though I'm walking my dog, and it was a beautiful day, it was 72 degrees. I just checked before I walked out the door. I'm like, that window is down way too low. They can get out of that car. So as we got closer, I slipped my pepper spray can into my hand because I anticipated there might be an issue. Hopefully there isn't. I'd rather not deal with that. But you got to be ready. Otherwise, you won't make it out alive. So we walked up. Sure enough, right as we got past the car, a pit bull, no joke, a pit bull comes jumping out of this car door, the window. The door was closed. The lady's in the front seat of the car talking on her phone, and this dog jumps out and comes snapping at Bacon. Right as he was almost there, I had spun around, I was ready, and I just hosed him down and pepper spray. And if you've never done this to a dog, sometimes they'll yelp. The vast majority of dogs that I pepper spray, they don't yelp. It takes them a second for it to soak in, and then they just absolutely, there's the choo-choo train in the background. They absolutely do not like it. They'll run in circles a lot of times trying to get away from the pepper spray. Sometimes they'll rub their nose in the dirt, but usually, almost always, it stops them. They want nothing to do with you. And in my experience, having encountered dogs that I've had to pepper spray before, they typically want nothing to do with you in the future again. So anyway, That was the pepper spray story as promised in this video, or this episode. But it had an immediate effect. But the thing is the point is this. If I had not been aware, and I make mistakes too, don't get me wrong, but if I had not been aware and watching for that dog, there is no way, from the time he jumped out the window until he got to Bacon and me, was probably maybe a full second. There's no way I would have been ready. But I hadn't been anticipating because I was watching ahead thinking, okay, if that dog clears, the other dog was some little, I don't know, some tiny little, wiener dog. I don't know what it was. It was some little wimp. He wasn't going to do nothing. But the pit bull wanted a piece of the action, and he got it. And that wasn't my first choice, but you got to do what you got to do. I'm not going to have him chew up my dog or me. So anyway, be thinking about that stuff. Don't be on your phone all the time or your headphones in. Even if you do those things occasionally, make sure you're paying attention to your surroundings. So that's that. Now, let's see. What do we have next? Okay, speaking of mountains, we go to Japan. Are we going to have time for this? Holy smokes. We got all kinds. What are we going to have to cut here? Oh, we'll have to get to this one next week. Moderna is in trouble over a COVID vaccine in the UK. This is an interesting story, folks, especially if you have kids. We don't give medical or legal advice or political opinions here on the MOA Broadcast, but especially if you have kids, this Moderna story is of interest. We'll get to that next week. We're not going to have time. What else do we want to move? Okay, we'll move that for next week. Let me put these papers over here. All right, let's go to Japan. Mount Fuji in Japan. Where did it go? Uh-oh, did I throw the wrong paper away? No, that's that one. Here we go. I got it, folks. Student rescued from mountain twice. Tuesday, April 29, 2025, a Chinese student who was airlifted from Japan's Mount Fuji last week had to be saved a second time just 4 days later, local authorities have said. The 27-year-old climber made an emergency call on April 22nd after getting altitude sickness on the mountain's Fujinomiya Trail, about 3,000 meters, which is nearly 10,000 feet for us here in Los Estados Unidos, above sea level. So he was out hiking. He got up to about 10,000. That's pretty high, man. So I think, if I recall, and this is not a joke, I memorized certain mountains when I was a kid. Mount Fuji is 12,388 feet. That's what it was about 20 years ago. I don't know if it's changed. And in case you're thinking mountains don't change, Mount Everest used to be 29,028 feet. But somewhere about 10, 12 years ago, maybe 15, it increased by 7 feet and is now 29,035 feet as of the last time I checked it. That's a true story. I'm not making that up. Check me. It may have gone up again. I have no idea. Or gone down. I don't know. But Fuji is 12,388 feet. He was at 10,000 feet. So he's getting up there. He got altitude sickness and basically had to call whatever their emergency services are. They flew out there. They sent choppers out and they picked him up and rescued him off the mountain. Okay? Now, get a load of this. 4 days later, police said they received another call to the mountain after the student, who has not been named, returned. Why did he go back to the same location on the mountain? To look for his cell phone. That's right, he left his cell phone, and apparently some other possessions were left behind. Another climber found him there, unable to move, after he apparently developed altitude sickness for a second time in 4 days. Now, the interesting part of this is there is no penalty when a climber needs to be rescued, but the Chinese student's case prompted outrage on social media, and calls for him to be charged, at least for the second rescue, were growing in number on social media. So he had to be airlifted apparently twice in 4 days. What would you do? What do you think? I mean, if you got altitude sick and then 4 days later went back for the same thing, both times you had to call in one of these these air rescues from an SAR crew, the Japanese equivalent. I wonder how much that costs over there. We've seen rescue costs here in the States be easily north of $50,000 to $100,000, all because you went back for your phone. Man, oh man. Okay, folks, let's go to our final story let's wrap it up. Where do we go? Yes. Let me get a quick drink here. My voice has been taking an absolute beating today. Where do we go? That's right, back to Florida. Read you the headline, then get into the story. This is a wild one. Florida man takes 8-inch chef's knife out of package to repeatedly stab woman. Why? Because she was criticizing his uncontrolled kids while in line at supermarket. This is like a TV show, I swear. Okay, Port Charlotte, Florida. This is the sentencing. A Florida man will spend over a decade behind bars for brutally stabbing a woman who criticized his children at a supermarket, according to the news article. There's no way I'm going to pronounce his name correctly. No disrespect. I'm going to give it a shot. Jamakarare Radkesh Gale, 40 years of age, was convicted by a jury of his peers in March after a 3-day trial. He was sentenced to 12 years of prison on one count of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon or causing great bodily harm, the state's attorney announced. The knife attack occurred at the Milan supermarket 30 miles northwest of Fort Myers. So the story. On June 9, 2023, Gale was shopping at the store with his children and ex-wife, where they proceeded to the meat section in the back of the store. A woman then entered and stood in line waiting to buy meat at the meat counter. At some point, there is a verbal altercation over the children's behavior, and the victim said something to Jamakare's ex-wife, and the two women began arguing. After getting half her meat order, the victim then left the counter and came back to pick up the rest. Words as she passed by the ex-wife again, Jamakare's ex-wife, words are exchanged between the two females again, and the ex-wife pushes the victim. According to the affidavit, the victim pushed back, and then Jamakare Gale steps up, and as she turns around, she bumps into Jamakare. He didn't like that none too much, folks. After being touched, Jamakare and the victim finally got into an argument. The victim can then be seen on surveillance footage pushing past Jamakare Gale against the meat cooler and walking past him. That apparently was the last straw. Jamakare then grabbed a cast iron pan from a shelf in the store and swung it toward the victim. But his oldest daughter intercepted and took the pan away. But folks, that wasn't going to stop Jamakare. He grabbed a packaged 8-inch, it says 8 foot here, but I believe they mean 8-inch, chef knife from the shelf, ripped off the packaging, and went to work on the victim. In the video, I observed Jamakare Gale swing overhand twice at the victim, then twice across the victim, and then twice in an overhand motion again, the detective writes in the affidavit. After that, he fled to the parking lot. The victim, while bleeding profusely, you got to give it to this lady, she was no quitter. She ran out to the parking lot to take a picture of Jamakare Gale's license plate number. He's still brandishing the knife, but he grabs his family, takes off. She got his license plate number. He went home. The victim had to be airlifted to a nearby hospital to receive life-saving treatment. Meanwhile, he haphazardly concealed the crime. Law enforcement executed a search warrant. Now this is interesting. They used surveillance video to identify the make and model of the suspect's car and utilized license plate readers in the area to pinpoint his location. He threw away all the stuff, the bloody clothes and the knife, in a bag in his own trash can, jumped in a car, and took off for New York. The defendant was arrested the next day in Queens, New York City by U.S. Marshals and extradited back to Florida, where he was successfully tried and sentenced. So I don't know if we need to use allegedly or not, but we'll stick with it. So folks, remember, the next time you're in Florida and being bothered by someone else's unruly kids, remember, there's a good chance the parents are even worse. Where do you think they got it from? The old stab apple doesn't fall far from the tree. All right, folks, that's going to do it for today's show. Thanks for joining us. Remember, if you don't prepare ahead of time, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.